Be doing a review of this great book by Craig Stevens. If you're learning how to oil paint, or even if you're learning how to do watercolor or do a acrylic painting, this video is just going over a review of this book, Simple Still Life Projects to Help You Master the Basics. It's called The Beginner's Guide to Oil Painting. It's by Craig Stevens, who I think is a teacher. Let me look at the bio real quick. He's like some type of professor of oil painting, professional painter, taught at schools, and he has works featured in the Sparrow Gallery in Sacramento and all of that. So, very he's pretty well known artist, and with that, this is really about the simple still life projects to help you master the basics, the beginner's guide to oil painting. So, if you're looking for a good book for a beginner oil painter specifically, this is absolutely amazing. But I think it's also great for intermediate to expert level painters as well. And I'll explain why in a minute, but we're going to review a couple ideas here. First of all, I just want to say the one of the people that gave this book a promo here, James Gurney. James Gurney, Dinotopia creator, wrote a bunch of books on the arts and things and painting and things like that. And I just gotta say, like, that is a great book promotion right there. I can't remember what these are called, but anyway, that is a great book promo right there. And all this book really is a ton of projects, step by step, of how this artist, Craig Stevens, paints still lifes. And it might sound very simple, very easy, very basic. And I think that is a very helpful idea for beginning artists, beginning oil painters, people that want to paint figuratively or paint things that they're looking at in front of them. And I think it's very helpful because at the end of the day, what can be really overwhelming for an artist is, what do I paint? Now I have to learn composition. Now I have to learn uh, color. Now I have to learn, like, I have to come up with inspiration. I have to come up with ideas. What should I paint? How many should I paint? And you look around your apartment and there are all sorts of things to paint. And it's not just whether it is a boring item or it's an exciting item to paint, but it's also this idea that you have all these amazing things all around you. You've got so many ideas, so many interesting objects to paint all around you. And that's something that I think a beginning artist can value and learn and understand, like a skill of being able to find, I don't want to get too cheesy here and say find the beauty in every object, but to find the worth of creating in every object, right? The worth of painting, the artisticness that can be pulled out of every single object in your daily life, pretty much. So basically, this book teaches that one powerful skill, like, knowing how to do simple life, still life projects to master the basics. And with this book, it's pretty straightforward. Every single project starts with exactly how Craig Stevens begins his painting, from an empty canvas to planning it out to setting up his palette to the entire process of painting. And they become more and more complex with more colorful and complex objects. And I think it's a really great book for beginners, and it moves to shoes, because I think at the end of the day, when you have a process like this, when you understand the exact step by step of how to approach something, you can apply that to just about anything and everything. Like, you might have thought that just painting a sphere was intimidating, but then you're like, oh, okay, I can paint a sphere. Now let me paint a bunch of fruits in a row. Now that felt intimidating at first, but then you're like, oh, if I could paint a bunch of fruits in a row, let me paint something that's shiny and crystally. And then, you start moving on to bigger and more complex objects. And before you know it, you're putting these objects into your own composition and you're creating these great artworks, and you are on your way to oil painting. Now, this is ultimately a more of like a still life painter's guide, and you could definitely apply the skills that you learn in here to other forms of painting, such as, you're doing figure painting, portrait painting, you're doing landscape painting. You could really apply these skills because, with those paintings, you have objects in a scene that you want to portray. And, that's how I got this paper bag painting, right? I was looking uh, for an object in my apartment that I thought might be mundane, that would be sort of boring. And I was like, okay, let me take this and try to make it interesting, paint it in a way that makes it look cool. Because look at this. This is just a glass bottle or glass jar with paintbrushes in it, and on a typical day, it looks pretty lame, right? Like if you were just like look at one, you wouldn't think anything of it. But the painter has this ability, or the artist has an ability to make it look interesting, to make it look pretty cool, and like, you know, add their own flavor and twists to it to make it look painterly and artistic and expressive. So, although this book doesn't necessarily teach style and expression, I think at the end of the day, whenever anyone paints, anytime you put your brush to a canvas, or put a clay onto a mold or whatever, I don't know exactly how clay sculptors do, but anytime you do that, you're applying everything you've ever learned in that skill or unlearned in that skill, and you're putting it into that work, your habits, your mental filtration device, and that becomes something creative, a creative process. So this really does a great job of teaching you just the fundamentals, so that any artist in your life, if you ever feel overwhelmed or confused or lost, or you wonder if there's like a process or some tricks, this really is it. Getting to the basics, getting to the fundamentals, mastering the basics, and then going from there. Now, I do want to add a caveat there. I was in a conversation, a virtual conversation. Someone had said that, before you can ever decide on a style, before you can ever try anything worthwhile, you need to like learn the fundamentals and become good at the fundamentals first. And while I agree that mastering the basics is very helpful, the way they said it was just like this, you have to do this before you can try something creative, like as an artist, right? Before you can express yourself, you need to be able to, you know, paint a masterpiece. I don't know. It just didn't sit right with me. So, well, I agree with the value of mastering basics, because if you're exhausted, if you're tired, if you've got a very large and intimidating painting to work with, um, sometimes you need to just think, oh, let me just do the basics here. Let me focus on the basics. But you don't necessarily, I'm more of an expressive artist. I feel artists should be allowed to, go and do what they feel is coming from their heart and their mind and their soul, and be willing to put that out there. And of course, being able to take criticism as well too. But at the end of the day, you don't necessarily need to do all of these projects 100,000 times till perfection in order to do artwork. And that's where I think that this is beautiful. Is it doesn't like tell you like, hey, you have to master these. You have to do every single one of these projects. It's really the message, I think, is in the medium here. The message is on like the front cover. Like, you can make still lifes all day long that are nice and beautiful. There is inspiration around everybody's apartment. Even if you don't have an apartment, and you live in like a little dormitory somewhere, there's inspiration somewhere out on the street. One person's trash is another person's treasure. And I think this book doesn't just give you the right tips and strategies to help you grow an art practice, but it helps you build some good basic skills that you can carry over anywhere. And or you can break them, like, you learn the basic skills, you learn the basic rules, and then you could go ahead and break them and find out your own way. But this is a very powerful book, particularly for the beginner. I think some of the stuff I was talking about like goes beyond just basics or beginners, but I think it's valuable for even intermediate or later artists to get this idea that you can find inspiration everywhere. It doesn't just have to be a masterpiece. It could be a combination of still life objects. And then what do you do when you get overwhelmed? Go back to the basics. So that these are some powerful ideas that I got from this book. So really good stuff here. Craig Stevens, his book, Simple Still Life Projects to Help You Master the Basics: The Beginner's Guide to Oil Painting. And with that, I know there's some other great artists that had given this book some praise. Terry Mura, Todd M. Casey, but James Gurney. I saw James Gurney, and I was like, okay, that's it. This is going to be a book that's worth reading or worth looking through. I haven't read the whole thing, but what I think is so powerful about this book is I feel like, and this is just my interpretation of another person's work. I feel like this book was designed in a way where the author, Craig Stevens, doesn't want you to copy every single project that he does. Once you read through the first 3 to 5 projects, you get an idea of how he's going to work. You get an idea of the exact steps that he uses every single time in all of these pages. And, you really feel like, oh, I don't need to keep copying every single project. I can come up with my own, right? Like by the 10th project here, you've got let's see some a jar with a paintbrush in it, and you're like, okay, I know exactly how to do it. I've gone through the first 5 or 10 projects exactly how Craig Stevens does it. This idea is just enough. Let me put a toothbrush in a water jar, or let me put I don't know, like a stamp in a water jar. Let me put a candle in a water jar. Let me stick some my little Mickey Mouse magnet in a water jar and see what happens, and let me paint that, right? So it's this idea, and you don't have to work exactly like him, but he gives you the exact steps. And at the end of the day, I think this also helps to bolster the creative aspect of all this. So such a great book, lots of amazing ideas, very powerful. And I will say this is one of my favorite pieces. Simple paper bag. And I just felt like I was able to really apply the steps that he learned and pull out a lot of the interesting details of the paper bag and highlight them in a painteresque way. But with that, great book. Gonna finish up with this live review, and just want to say thank you for tuning in and watching this video.